Today I'd like to talk about a very personal topic, and it's about my journey through having small fiber neuropathy. And it started about 3.5 years ago when I had a panic attack out of the blue and wound up in the emergency room for an evening. And I think it was about 10 hours I was there. And at that time, I started feeling various physical sensations throughout my body. I would feel numbness on the side of my face, and through the weeks that follow, I would start to feel jabbing sensations, as though somebody was randomly stabbing me with a pin. And uh, these sensations would happen from time to time. It wasn't constant by any means. And at the time, I was diagnosed with having anxiety. So I began going to therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. And, um, and these things were quite helpful for me. But it was a very odd situation because literally overnight, from the day before I had that panic attack, to the day after, my life was just drastically different. How I felt was drastically different. Um, Situations that would ordinarily not cause me any issues were suddenly causing me great anxiety. Driving or stepping onto an airplane, etc. So it took me some time to sort through it, but words can't describe though the intensity of what you feel, in these situations, and it was constant for me. It was constant. So going through therapy was very, very helpful during this time period, and it took me about 6 months to really get to the point where things were starting to normalize for me. But concurrently with this anxiety, I was feeling these physical sensations, this occasional jabbing sensation, which doctors had diagnosed as being paresthesia. But I was told the root cause of this paresthesia was anxiety, so I treated it as though it was some psychological issue. And, I went through, a year of therapy and basically going through, trying to sort through whatever issues I thought that I had, or etc. And about a year and a half ago, these physical sensations that I was feeling really escalated. So at any given point in time, like on a given day, I may feel it hundreds of times, whereas previously, maybe, now and then I would feel it. It was becoming a very constant fixture in my life. And not just the stabbing sensations, but I also started to feel burning sensations, as though my skin was very hot, or smoldering, a fire type feeling. And these sensations I started feeling quite regularly. So it was at this time that I knew that this was not a quote unquote anxiety issue. There was more to this. And at that point, I started to seek out the consult of various neurologists. And a few months later, I had gotten a skin biopsy, and that's how I was diagnosed with small fiber neuropathy. But quite interestingly, up until that point of time, whenever I would go to a doctor, for the most part, I was told the issue was anxiety. I mean, I remember very clearly one doctor, within 5 minutes of talking, told me that I needed antidepressants, and just wanted to prescribe it to me, and told me how much I needed it. And yeah, it's quite crazy how another human being within 5 minutes can make a blanket psychological assessment when they truly don't understand exactly what it is that you're feeling, and just drawing conclusions based on very incomplete information. And that's something that I've learned a lot about. And I actually feel that I've gotten many spiritual lessons through this experience, such as that, because we see this in the way that others will be towards you, and it makes me reflect on my own thought processes before this started, such as not prejudging people, particularly given that so many people have invisible conditions, and we don't know people's life stories or what they're going through. So it's very important to, to really listen to people. And going to doctors up until the point of my diagnosis, for the most part, I felt this was one attribute that was rather lacking, and I wish that it was there, because I feel that it's so important for somebody that's a healer to listen to the other person and to not make blanket assessments very quickly when it's not necessarily true. Now, granted, doctors have their own issues in that they have very limited time with their patients, and their job is to come up with solutions to problems. But some problems are more complex and do require more time. So, with that said, once I was diagnosed, I then understood that my problem was actually at the core a physical problem and not a psychological problem. And that actually was very, it lightened my heart quite dramatically to have that understanding, and it was very powerful. But with that said, it's a very scary condition, because I remember reading some real horror stories online at that time about people that have gone through this and became disabled very quickly. And a word of caution, I think, for any illness or condition, if you Google these things and start reading people's accounts, you're probably going to read the worst stories, because those are the people that feel most incentivized to write about it. So a word of caution with that. But in actuality, small fiber neuropathy affects different people in different ways and has varying rates of progression and et cetera. So at that time, my aim was to try to find as quickly as possible the cause of it. So in 50% of small fiber neuropathy cases, a cause is able to be found based on current medical knowledge. And in the other half of those cases, it's deemed as idiopathic, meaning they don't know what causes it. The medical profession doesn't know at this point the underlying cause. And because of that, there's limited treatment options, and most of the treatment options deal with reducing pain through prescription medications such as gabapentin or Lyrica. I know currently there's some case studies being done. There's one, I think, doing IVIG therapy for idiopathic cases. So there should be progress, over the next few years. But right now, the treatment options are quite limited. So back then, my objective was to try to find the underlying cause for the condition as quickly as possible. And so I devoted a lot of time and energy into this, and I went from doctor to doctor doing exhaustive testings, and every doctor at the end of the test said it's idiopathic, and I'm sorry, there's very little that could be done about it. And what's also interesting is that each doctor would say something different in terms of projecting forward of what I should expect. One doctor gave me a very bad scenario, and he just said, this condition's gonna, the pain, because the pain levels were getting worse and worse for me and more constant, and he told me that would only progress onwards through the future. And he said eventually my nerves would just get all shot out, and at that point I would lose sensation. And I've had the other extreme where I was told that, some people live with it all their lives and it's not that bad. And the truth is obviously somewhere in the middle, generally speaking. I mean, some people do, it progresses to the point where they do become disabled in the sense that, when they walk, they feel like they're walking on glass, or they have such pain that prevents them from wanting to move around. But I think those are worst case scenarios. So on my end, I make it an emphasis to walk a lot every day and to make my diet as good as possible. I eat lots of salads and juices, and I'm very mindful of my diets. And to do everything possible to try to ensure that, presuming that this condition is progressive, that's I'm able to effectively push off the worst aspects of it until there is an effective treatment for it. And what else can I say about this? So some interesting things too is that pain and the perception of pain. So a year ago, I remember, there were some nights where I was just completely freaked out and I would sleep with ice packs. Wondering how on earth am I going to deal with this for the rest of my life, with that type of pain. But a very interesting thing happened, and I think for each individual this is different. So, and I don't know how things will be for me in the future. I can only say how they are for me right now. But if I were to compare myself today versus a year ago, well, physically, I don't think the condition has improved. It may have worsened a little bit, but I don't think it's improved. But my perception of the pain has changed quite dramatically. Now, I've read a lot about the subject of neuroplasticity, and I've done a lot of exercises with this. I've done a lot of hypnosis, self-hypnosis. I've taught myself some aspects of self-hypnosis. And there's various things that I've done, but my perception of pain has I think, radically shifted. And aspects that would have freaked me out a year ago, today, somehow I can deal with much better. When I sleep at night, usually the worst for me is at night when I'm trying to sleep. I'll feel these very sharp shooting sensations or these burning sensations, and I used to even be awoken sometimes throughout the night with these things. And now my mind is somehow able to zone it out somehow. Not all of the times, sometimes it's really bad, but more regularly though, I'm able to kind of somehow psychologically distance myself from what I'm feeling, and it's very hard to explain, but so I feel very grateful for that. And I've also learned too other ways to help deal with this. So rather than sleep with ice packs, I now put fans around myself, and that really helps, particularly for the burning. It doesn't help for the jabbing sensations, but it helps for the burning, which is good. So while physically I don't think I've improved, and maybe I've gotten a little worse, mentally I think actually I've improved a lot, from a year ago. So I tend to have an optimistic disposition, and I have to say, with this type of condition, your moods are going to shift more. And I think with any chronic pain condition, it's just common sense. I mean, there was a study I read with rats where rats were given random electric shocks, and that led to depression amongst the rats. So it's just common sense that, if a person is dealing with randomized pain, there's more uncertainty to their life, and there's more risks psychologically. And so it's important, really important, to constantly feed good messages to yourself and to, exercise and eat right and do everything possible to aid yourself in this battle. And I have to say, in terms of the future, I think for the idiopathic cases, well, one, it seems very probable that this is either autoimmune or immune mediated based on, different doctors will tell you different things, but from the most knowledgeable neurologists that I've spoke with and the most knowledgeable doctors that I've spoke with, there seems to be at least from my conversations, some degree of I'll call it some amount of consensus that it's most likely is immune mediated or autoimmune. And I know in my own condition, I tested a low positive for an autoimmune antibody, which may or may not be a contributing factor to my condition. So, there's a lot more being known about this, but I am very optimistic about the future. I know there's a treatment, ARA 290, which will be available in a few years. And I know that deals specifically with scardosis, caused small fiber neuropathy, but when you research these things, I think it is cause for great optimism. And another part of this I do want to mention is about 3 weeks before my symptoms began, and for a long time I tried to figure out the cause of my problem, and given that it most likely is immune mediated, I was told that I probably had some kind of infection, like a low level infection that I was unaware of, and which maybe my immune system triggered some antibody that an alteration of my immune system that so long after the infection was gone, my immune system now is attacking myself. But one thing I do want to mention that I think is noteworthy is about 3 weeks before this condition started for me, I had taken it was a penicillin-based antibiotic. Now, I've read a lot about the fluoroquinins. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but the link between that and nerve damage and the fact that the FDA has now black boxed those. But when I've researched other antibiotics, I did read things linking, autoimmunity and various types of improbable, but they do happen, side effects. I think one of the problems with medications is that, we're using statistical indicators, but if we're a statistical outlier, it doesn't do us much good. If we're the 0.01% that is adversely affected, the statistics don't matter in that situation. So I think this is something to be mindful of, and it's something to certainly be aware of when deciding whether to take a prescription medication or not. This is certainly something I would be more mindful in the future to maybe talk with multiple doctors about and really do my due diligence. But with that said, it's at times it's a challenging condition. There are days where I don't feel good. There are other days where actually I feel okay, and there are moments where I feel like I don't have any problem whatsoever. And it's just it's a peculiar condition, and the uncertainty when you feel new physical sensations, or if you're in social settings and you're having conversation with somebody and suddenly you feel like somebody's stabbing you with a pin, and you're smiling, being polite, and trying to remain focused. And there's all sorts of issues that this condition, or challenges that this position gives us on a day-to-day basis. But we learn, we evolve, we adopt, and for now, I think I've done a good job at that, and I'm hoping in the future I'll be able to remain being highly adaptable to this condition. But I know its challenges, I know its uncertainties, and my heart really goes out to everybody that is experiencing the worst of its conditions, because I know it's really something that no human being should have to go through. And I really hope and pray that in sometime in the near future, there will be, if not a cure, there'll be an effective treatment to render this condition benign. So I hope that my recounting of this experience is helpful for some of you, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.